Hello, Vin's Nature campers, families, and friends, and thanks for joining us today. It's Sarah here at Vin's Nature Camp, and we are getting ready for Campfire Stories. Our campers will tell you that Friday afternoon campfire is a wonderful tradition at Vin's Nature Camp, where we have a chance to come together to look back on the week we've had together, to say goodbye, to share favorite stories and memories around the campfire, and to roast s'mores over it. So hopefully you have your s'more supplies handy. I've got mine right here. And we're ready for Campfire Stories. Now during the summer, the first thing we always do at Friday afternoon campfire is give everyone who wants to the chance to share their favorite memory from the week. It's a really nice way to reflect on all the good things that have happened that week. And in these unprecedented times, I find it really meaningful to take a little bit of time to think of all the good that's happened this week. One of my favorite memories was a hike I had with my dogs this week. We were in the woods, the sun was out, the snow had melted, and the birds were chirping, and spring was definitely in the air, which got me really excited about upcoming warm weather adventures. So now take a minute and think back on your week. Close your eyes if it helps, and think of everything you did this week, and pick out a memory. You might have lots of favorite memories, and pick one, and I'd like you to share it with whoever's around you. So pause the video right now and go ahead and do that. All right, now that everybody's had a chance to share, if they wanted to, we will get ready for today's story. Storytelling is an ancient tradition. Long before people had ways of writing down information, they were telling stories to teach younger generations. These stories were told to help people understand the world around them. Back then, they didn't have our modern scientific understanding of the world. They had their observations and their belief systems. And they used those to create stories, to explain the natural phenomena happening around them. Sometimes their stories also taught moral lessons about why it's important to behave in a certain way or do certain things. So remember, these are stories that have been around a long time. They might not be that scientifically accurate, but they tell us a lot about the way people used to understand their world and nature. Today's stories come from one of my favorite books, Keepers of the Earth. It's a compilation of Native American stories and environmental education activities compiled by Caduto and Joseph Bruchac. I've chosen two stories today that are relevant to what's going on in nature right now. Our first story is called Spring Defeats Winter, from the Seneca people of the northeastern woodlands. When the world was new long ago, an old man was wandering around. This old man had long white hair, and wherever he stepped, the ground grew hard as stone. When he breathed, the rivers stopped flowing, and the ponds became solid. The birds and animals fled before him, and plants dried up and died as the leaves shriveled and fell from the trees. Finally, this old man found a place where he could set up his lodge. He made the walls of ice and covered it over with snow. He sat inside his lodge in front of a fire which gave off no heat, though a strange flickering light came from it. His only friend was the north wind, who sat beside the fire with him and laughed as they spoke of things they did to make the world cold and hard. They sat and smoked their pipes through the long white nights. One morning, though, as the two dozed by their fire, they felt that something was wrong. The air was harder to breathe, and when they looked outside, they saw strange things happening. The snowdrifts were growing smaller. Cracks were forming in the ice on the ponds. "Huh," said the North Wind. "I can stay no longer." He went out of the lodge and flew through the air toward the north, not stopping again, till he reached a place where snow and ice were deep, and there was no hint of warmth. But the old man did not stir. He knew his magic was strong. He had built his lodge to last. Now there came a knocking at his door. Someone was striking against the ice so hard that pieces were falling from his blows. "Go away," the old man shouted. "No one can enter my lodge." Even as he said it, the door of the lodge broke and fell to the ground. A young man with a smile on his face stood there. Without a word, he stepped into the lodge and sat on the other side of the fire from the old man. He held a green stick in his hand, and with it he stirred the fire. As he stirred the fire, it began to grow warm. The old man felt sweat begin to run down his face. "Who are you?" said the old man. "Why have you broken down my door? No one can come in here but my friend North Wind. If you do not leave, I will freeze you with my breath." Then the old man tried to blow his chilly breath at the young stranger, but only a thin mist came from his lips. The young man laughed. "Old man," he said, "let me stay here and warm myself by your fire." The old man grew angry. "I am the one who makes the birds and animals flee. Wherever I step, the ground turns into flint. I make the snow and ice. I am mightier than you." As he spoke, though, the old man felt more sweat run off his brow, and the young man continued to smile. "Listen," the stranger said. "I am young and strong. You cannot frighten me. Surely you know who I am. Do you not feel how warm my breath is? Wherever I breathe, the plants grow and the flowers bloom. Where I step, the grasses sprout and snow melts away. The birds and the animals come to me. See how long my hair is? Your hair is falling out now, old man. Wherever I travel, I bring the sunshine, and you cannot stay. Do you not know me, old man? Do you not hear my companion? She is the south wind. She is blowing on your lodge. It is your time to leave." The old man opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He grew smaller and smaller, and the sweat poured from his brow as he melted away. Then he was gone. The walls of his lodge of ice and snow fell in. Where his cold fire had burned, white flowers now bloomed. Once again, the young man, Spring, had defeated the old man, Winter. So that story was an explanation of the changing of the seasons and how nothing really lasts forever. Sometimes winter can feel like it's never gonna end, but eventually it always does. We know these days that we have seasons because of the Earth's tilt on its axis. When the northern hemisphere, where we are, is tilted away from the sun, we have shorter days and colder weather. And then as we tilt back towards the sun, the days grow longer and warmer. But that's not something that ancient people understood. So they pictured a young man defeating an older man. I bet you've heard people talk or say the phrase, "Old Man Winter." It's still common that we talk about winter as if it were an old man. Our next story is about something quite delicious. It is called Manabozho and the Maple Trees, from the Anishinaabe people of the Great Lakes region. A long time ago, when the world was new, the Creator made things so that life was very easy for the people. There was plenty of game, and the weather was always good, and the maple trees were filled with thick, sweet syrup. Whenever anyone wanted to get any maple syrup from the trees, all they had to do was break off a twig and collect it as it dripped out. One day, Manabozho went walking around. "I think I'll go see how my friends, the Anishinaabe people, are doing," he said. So he went to their village, but there was no one around. So Manabozho went looking for the people. They were not fishing in the streams or the lake. They were not working in the fields hoeing their crops. They were not gathering berries. Finally, he found them. They were in the grove of maple trees near their village. They were all just lying on their backs with their mouths open, letting the maple syrup drip into their mouths. "This will not do," Manabozho said. "My people are all going to be fat and lazy if they keep on living this way." So Manabozho went down to the river. He took with him a big basket he had made of birch bark. With his basket, he brought back many buckets of water. He went to the tops of the maple trees and poured the water in so that it thinned the syrup. Now thick maple syrup no longer dripped out of the broken twigs. Now what came out was thin and watery and just barely sweet to the taste. "This is how it will be from now on," Manabozho said. "No longer will syrup drip from the maple trees. Now there will be only this watery sap. When people want to make maple syrup, they will have to gather many buckets full of sap in a birch bark basket like mine. They will have to gather wood and make fires so they can heat stones to drop in the baskets. They will have to boil the water with the heated stones for a long time to make even a little maple syrup. Then my people will no longer grow fat and lazy. Then they will appreciate this maple syrup the Creator made available to them. Not only that, this sap will drip only from the trees at a certain time of the year. Then it will not keep people from hunting and fishing and gathering and hoeing in the fields. This is how it's going to be," Manabozho said, and that is how it is to this day. That story told us some amazing things. First is that people have known for a really long time how to turn maple sap into maple syrup, and that the process really hasn't changed over the many, many years that people have been collecting sap. You still have to collect many gallons of sap in order to make just the tiniest bit of maple syrup, but it's definitely worth it. The story also teaches us a lesson not to take the gifts of nature for granted. We really have to appreciate everything that our world gives us. That includes the maple sap that we collect and the air that we breathe. Lastly, we know now, with our understanding in science, that sap flows in the spring because of the differences in temperatures between the daytime and the nighttime. And because now that the ground is starting to thaw out, the trees are starting to send nutrient-rich sap up to their branches to feed the growing buds. But of course, the people back then who told this story originally didn't know that. They thought it was a sign. They thought there was a reason telling them that during the spring, early spring, is a time for them to be collecting sap, whereas they shouldn't be doing that during other times of the year, which makes sense. You can't grow any crops right now. The tiny little seedlings, little shoots, would freeze and die. So this was a time when they could spend their time collecting sap and making syrup, as opposed to other times of the year when they were busy harvesting their crops or fishing when the waters weren't frozen. So this was very important lessons for them to understand, that there's a timing for everything. So that's it for today. Now it's time for me to roast my marshmallow. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope I'll see you back here next week for more Campfire Stories. Until then, have a wonderful